I think we won't muck about then. I think it's time to welcome our next panel to the stage. If you could, please welcome B. Rowlatt, our host, with Anna Whitehouse, Sarah Gregory, and Akeela Ahmed, and Sophie Walker. Thank you so much. Thank you. Hey, nice to meet you. And you. Hey, welcome.
So we have to remain seated. Welcome to, does this work? Can you hear me okay? This is such a momentous occasion that I actually can't sit down. It's too exciting. Welcome to Pregnant and Then Screwed. Welcome to the key event. Sorry to be biased, but this is so important. It's about campaigning. I'm really happy to see loads of little baby campaigners in there. We're here to share with you, sisters are doing it for themselves. And this matters a huge amount. And I'll tell you why. Anyone that's done any kind of campaigning will have had that moment where you just want to rip your hair out. You think, why am I doing this? I've got kids, I've got a day job. But it's really the most important thing you can do. It's important for the exterior and for the interior life. And, you know, to take it to a dark place. I don't know if you've looked outside recently, but it's Armageddon out there politically. It's so divided and so bitter, and not just in this country. And there is an answer to that, and the answer to that is the energy in this room. And that's what we're looking at today. And luckily, we've got an amazingly brilliant panel. This is slightly awkward. I'm kind of semi-squatting now. We will sit down and get orderly in a minute. I'm going to actually abuse my position just for 10 seconds to talk very quickly about my own campaign. I'm a writer and journalist, and I run a campaign called Mary on the Green, and it's to memorialise and celebrate Mary Wollstonecraft, the foremother of feminism, who's been hideously overlooked. I'm going to put some little postcards out here. Commercial break over. Now I will introduce you to our dazzling panel, a star selection, handpicked, of women renowned for their extraordinary campaigning genius. First of all, here we have Sarah Gregory. Sarah was born an activist, in her words, because everyone has their triggers. We all come to it differently. Sarah was born ready. She's the founder of About Times and campaigns around making motherhood diverse. Next up, we have Mother Pucker, Anna Whitehouse. You may know her from her broadcasts. She's the founder of Flex Appeal around flexible working, so we're going to be hearing more about that. Akeela Ahmed, who's just been granted an MBE, your ladyship. So big up to Akeela. She's one of the organisers of the Women's March, and just, you know, one of those people, you know what they say, if you want something done, ask a busy person. We don't have to shush babies, we love babies. Don't you worry, sweetheart. No worries at all. And last but not least, we have the wonderful Sophie Walker, well known to all of us, an ex-journalist, a deep thinker, and the leader of the Women's Equality Party. A huge round of applause, please. Women's Equality Party was launched right here, so that's exciting, and who knows what things may spring. We should all meet up in 10 years and see what's happened from this event. I'm going to sit down now and try and calm down a bit. It's just so very exciting. I want to start straight away with you, Sarah. Let's talk, well, first introduce us to your campaign and what you think your best achievement has been. Don't be shy.
I won't. I founded a monthly journal which is run, edited, illustrated, just everything is produced by women, but it is for everyone to read. It's, I found, I don't know about you guys, but the social media is really noisy, and there's all these people kind of shouting and talking and creating content, and there's nobody not necessarily really listening. So About Times.
Get closer to the mic. Can you? Is the sounding all right?
Can you hear me? Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
We need to shout up a bit, or just lean in, so to speak.
Lean in. Is that better?
Close.
Could you hear what I said about Times? Anyway, I hope you did. So yeah, it's run, edited, illustrated, everything by women, but for everyone to read. I think we need more women's voices. I don't know about you, but I was sick of just hearing the same old thing. So, sorry. yes, I think I was talking about social media being quite noisy and having a space to actually have conversations and learn from one another. Because I feel if we want to change, we've got to understand everybody's kind of experiences and perspectives and actually have a conversation. So we created this platform to lift all women's voices, not just the few. And so, yeah.
So battling your way into that sort of shout-a-thon.
Into that space.
Online.
We're not asking for permission to speak. We're just here. So, yeah, we welcome contributions from all women.
Do check it out, About Times. Anna, can you tell us about your campaign?
I'll lean in. So I founded Flex Appeal 3 years ago, and I'm an accidental activist. I'd love to have said I was born ready, but I really wasn't.
But it's a great story. Tell us this will resonate.
I kind of just edged in. I posted one day, I think it was when I was late for the nursery pickup, and I've said this on our blog a couple of times. Somebody got their briefcase stuck in the tube door, and I could see the face of all the parents on that tube carriage going, no, that it's £1 a minute after 6 in many nurseries here, and I ain't got the time or the money. And I remember that day just feeling like I was surviving, not necessarily living. It didn't feel like this was a working setup. And so I quit my job the next day, and this was after my flexible working request had been rejected for simply the possibility that my request might open the floodgates to others seeking flexibility.
So just hold that thought. They thought your idea was so good that they decided to reject it.
as is the fear at the top. Yeah. And so in that moment, I posted, I quit, and I did not expect any response. I had 67 followers at the time, and so many other people weighed in going, me, yeah, I quit. I'm about to quit. I can't make this work. And that was where it started, was voicing something like Sarah said, voicing something that felt maybe wasn't being said, as Jolie has obviously on a mass scale here, and pressing a button on it. And then, like I said, I accidentally started campaigning, and that's where we are.
What do you feel that the campaign's achieved so far?
Well, we set out with 2 very simple points, and one is to help employees ask for it. The amount of people who don't feel confident in even asking for it, and often they will get it. They might not, but then the next woman who comes along or the next man that comes along will get it. You're forging, each and every one of us has a responsibility to push that forward. And then to encourage businesses to not have the head in the sand approach of, but it might open the floodgates to other people living and working harder for us. And I think that's really what we're trying to do.
It's great that you mentioned dads as well as mums there in that quest for parenting leave.
Yeah, I mean, my husband's on some ice skating rink at the moment with 2 children. he's not in a good place, but he's you know, it's very much moving that forward.
All there for the cause. Akeela, can you tell us about your campaign and your achievements in that campaigning?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a co-organiser of Women's March on London, and I joined Women's March at the first march in 2017 when Trump was elected, and I spoke at the opening of the march outside the US Embassy. And before then, I had set up an online platform called She Speaks, We Hear. And that was really just about trying to bring together women who wouldn't normally talk to each other from different kind of spaces, and with a focus on Muslim women, because in particular, I felt that they don't really have that kind of space kind of in the mainstream where we kind of hear them in their own voices, but also we get to see and understand that they're just like any other woman, you know, with all the kind of concerns about motherhood and schools and employment and all of that kind of stuff. So anyway, before I joined Women's March, I set up She Speaks, We Hear. And then I spoke at the march, and I think that was the first time that I had felt this kind of overwhelming sense of solidarity. I had never felt that before. It was so powerful. And I think at that point was when I kind of thought, you know what, actually, we can do this. We as women, but also, you know, with our allies as well, can come together and speak out and actually create change, even when you're faced with the most kind of I don't know, risible man in the world, you know, Donald Trump. And so at that point, I was a kind of supporter, and I wasn't a co-organizer. But then over time, I became more involved, and I became a co-organizer, and we've done so much. I mean, at that march in 2017, we had over 100,000 people. I'm sure many of you were there that day.
That's so exciting.
Marching. Yeah. Today, we've got another march, and now we're sort of focusing less on Trump and what's going on globally, but more about what's happening here in the UK, and all the sort of so many different issues that are affecting women and impacting women that, you know, people still think, you know, are not aware of, and think, actually, we've got women's equality. Well, no, we haven't. The one thing I sort of always got told before I joined Women's March, sort of on social media and by so-called well-meaning people, was that how can you, as a Muslim woman who wears a hijab, be a feminist? Because of what goes on, you know, back home.
Really? Still this?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what I answered to them was, this is my home, and yeah, you're right, things are pretty crap for women in certain regards, and that's why I'm speaking out, and that's why I'm a feminist. And that's why I'm here today. And I just think it's just amazing that as a campaigner, you can campaign on your issues, but you can also work with other people on similar issues.
I'd like to pick up on that exact point, because, I mean, I'm guessing that a lot of people here have got an idea or something that they'd like to develop or push out, and perhaps we can be helpful in that. I want to come to you next. Sophie, as the leader of the Women's Equality Party, you know a thing or two about getting bringing people together and getting something off the ground. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I'm still figuring it out. So I never intended to be an activist. I mean, my parents are quite active. My mum was a member of the Women's Liberation Movement first time round. Thanks, Mum. But that actually, the amount of marching and protesting put me off. Like my early childhood memories of the endless marches in the rain and thinking, nah, not really. So the point at which I realised that I was going to be an activist was when I had children, which I think is what radicalises a lot of women, right? That's the point at which we understand we have been sold a lie. And I think it's also the point at which we start to see that this is a structural inequality, right? Don't buy that guff about just trying harder as individuals, get thicker skin. I'm here for the thin-skinned, empathetic people who bruise. And so that is what, for me, that's a really important part of building a movement. It's about understanding that nobody's coming to the rescue, and that actually that's the ultimate point of liberation, because now we can just get on and do it ourselves. Second of all, I think one of the most important things I've learned about building a movement is that if you are sitting in a room with a whole bunch of people who look and sound like you, then you are doing it wrong, right? And I think the other
Talk
thing that
more about that. So, I mean, how do you amplify that message? How do you reach out? Because it's easy to start with people that you know and that look like you. So how do you push that?
Well, you don't push it. That's the thing. You listen. The biggest mistake I made was, initially I was sort of full of this missionary zeal, and I went out with this sort of like white middle-class woman's confidence and privilege saying, I'm going to fix it, we're going to fix it, come on, let's all go and fix it. And then began to realise that actually there are all these amazing layers and levels of inequality and discrimination that I just didn't understand. And it was really shocking to me, particularly because, you know, one of the things that drove me into being an activist was because my daughter is disabled. So my daughter has autism, and it was an absolute disaster trying to get any sort of understanding or tolerance or support. And so I thought I had started to understand this intersectionality point because I had a daughter who I knew would be doubly discriminated against as a woman with a disability. But the point when I became one of many, many women who started to grow the Women's Equality Party, one of the earliest things I learned was, wow, there's so many layers of inequality, and unless you are intersectional in your approach, this is simply not going to work. And that is both exhilarating and also intimidating, because you have got to learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I spent a lot of time feeling like a total idiot for starting to understand how little I understood about the breadth of the discrimination that women face.
There's a step change then, isn't there, between, you know, a campaign that's about your life, that's targeted, where you just go, I'm on a mission, I'm going to try and fix this problem. There's a step change to creating something very much bigger.
Yes.
And I'm quite interested in that point. Can you just, at what point did you think, you know, it went from one thing to another?
I mean, I started as a campaigner for girls with autism. That's where I started from, because there was just no support. And everybody kept saying, and it took us ages to get a diagnosis, because they kept saying, well, girls don't get autism, only boys get autism. Because most of the research on autism is done by men on men and boys. I had to change the way I worked. I had to go part-time. I was one of those women on the tube with like inky to-do lists all the way up their arm.
Yeah.
Constantly trying to remember the next thing.
But on the upscaling, so the next phase, is that, you know, because I want to get to the sort of the tools that we can use in the upscaling of a movement.
But
so,
I suppose what I'm trying to say is that there is a point at which you are just propelled because of a need that is not there. So that's where I got going. My activism began because I simply had to create a support system that wasn't there for me, and I did that partly by going online. I found a whole online community of women, because women, you know, do a lot of work from home. They don't have the access, so we did a lot of that networking. But then we also did some public meetings. The Women's Equality Party was launched here, which was wonderful. Our very first public meeting, I was asked by our co-founder Catherine Mayer to talk a bit about shared childcare. And it was the first time I sort of stood up and spoke in public about the importance of sharing care and investing in care and creating a society that values care and doesn't expect women to do it underpaid, unseen, unvalued. And I was actually in a room full of people going, yes! Rather than sort of looking at our watches and trying to sidle out the door. So
this is a unifying theme, is that each of you has experienced this moment where your own personal horrible distress, in a way, has actually chimed with other people. Anna, I want to talk to you about how you kind of weaponized social media, because that's the way that you connected to all of these others. Can you talk about campaigning in social media?
Yeah, well, actually picking up on Sophie's point, I think being comfortable with being uncomfortable is probably the biggest thing you need to hold on to if you're going to go into any campaign.
So what do you mean by uncomfortable? Unpopular?
Yeah, unpopular.
Sweaty, quite
sweaty.
Getting heat, people will slag you off online, these kinds of things.
Rocking backwards and forwards, questioning every single iota of what you're doing and what you're saying and how you're saying it, and the voice and the background that's propelled you to saying those words. And I think there was a point where I don't know anyone here remembers the horrific Hello and Next campaign that I was in. And it was 5 women that were selected, 5 white middle-class women on a panel that had been running the campaign had been running for 15 years. And it was to find a star mum for the Star Mum Awards. And it was with Kate Silverton and I, and we were sat there going, this feels a bit uncomfortable. Nobody is really questioning it. It's been running for 15 years, so who are we to maybe question this? And it went out, and the backlash was understandandly and rightfully extreme. I think you had a proper go at me, didn't you, Sarah?
Oh, that's
Fight.
I mean, I'm talking about the person who made me feel the most uncomfortable sat next to me. No, but in the best possible way. And that was exactly what you were saying. I was operating in a bubble of my experience. And what went from there was very difficult discussion and an understanding that what I was saying was not relevant to everybody. And so it's being able to sit in that moment and say, instead of getting offended, instead of shutting up shop, instead of closing the door, blocking people, edging out of the building, going, I'm just not cut out for this, that's where you can take the momentum from that potential negativity and drive it forward to, well, why did that happen? How was I at the heart of that? And that was the biggest, you asked what was the biggest turning point in what we've done, was at that point, opening up the conversation. I'm still not even close to being there, but it definitely was a pivotal moment.
Akeela, how has that altered your campaigning, this sort of huge multiplication that can suddenly occur via social media?
Yeah, I think that is the biggest challenge, being sort of comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think with Women's March, we've really tried to create this kind of many-voiced space where people can come into the space irrespective of their political affiliations, irrespective of, just anything, basically. Any of these kind of isms or, what would normally be boundaries to people kind of connecting to each other. So we really attempt and try to be intersectional, but it's something that you have to constantly work at. You can't one day turn around and be like, that's it, we're intersectional, job done. It doesn't work like that. You continually have to kind of bring people into space, make sure you're listening, make sure you're kind of building those partnerships, and especially with people who you wouldn't normally agree with in your everyday life. And I think one of the kind of biggest lessons I've had as a campaigner is that, and I've kind of done campaigning in different ways for the last 20 years, is that when you kind of start off and you kind of see this need and you think, actually, there's no one that's doing this, I need to kind of just get up and do it. And that's fantastic, that's great. But I think one of the lessons I've learned is that actually at that point, it would have been good if I said, this needs to be done. Let me now try and take a little bit of time to reach out to people I know, or even people that I don't know.
Delegating.
Delegate and collaborating.
I'm seeing a few nods here.
And
Delegating.
build that into the campaign from the start. Otherwise, you start doing this amazing, wonderful stuff using social media, but then suddenly you feel like, wait a minute, I'm kind of alone, and you can risk burnout, and then you have people coming in.
So I'm hearing some sort of quite stressful terms like burnout and sweating and rocking. We don't want to paint a really negative portrait.
I just wanted to come in on
I'd like
exactly
to highlight
that.
some positives, and we'll come to you. But tell us a positive about being a campaigner. What's it brought to you or to your community?
I think if you genuinely believe in something, and so it's not like I have this whole issue with kind of issue appropriation. So if you just think something will make you look good, don't just go and try and do that. Do something because you really believe in it. And I think you'll magnetise people. People will see that you're drawn and you're not just doing it to build yourself. So I will go and ask people that I don't agree with or that I know have a different position to me to write for about times, because I think that all opinions are valid, and we've got to have these discussions, and how are we going to build them if they're just one-sided? So yeah, I think if you genuinely believe it in your heart, and you go out to people and you ask, and it's not just about building yourself, I think.
But has it changed you?
Has it changed me? I don't know, because I was born an activist. I wasn't accidental.
You're just more of an activist.
No, I wasn't.
I want to just quickly scan if there are questions that you're itching to get in, because we've got such talents here on the panel, and there's something that we can be helpful with. Please do stick up your hand. We've got a microphone here and probably people at the ready. No, that's fine. We'll carry on. Sophie, is there? You have to wave quite vigorously. Hello, yes, we do have someone. Do you want to just stand up and shout it?
Starts and the support network for
Sorry, can
children.
you just quickly start again for the people who couldn't quite make you out at the beginning?
I've been working for 2 years in Tower Hamlets to save some nurseries, public day nurseries. Unfortunately, the mayor decided to close them anyway. He's executive mayor, he can do that. And I'm just wondering though, because they wound the nurseries down, and we had very few parents who could come and, stick up for them. And I was really working hard to try and get other people on board, and I think I found it difficult to get people to care, essentially. There's so many things, I guess, competing for people's attention. There's so many things to care about. And I guess I'm just wondering what's worked the best for them, the people on the panel that's inspiring.
So on a targeted local campaign like that, who's got advice for, what was your name?
Candice.
For Candice.
And we did have help from the WEP. Thank you.
Anna.
Yeah, I would say that don't underestimate the power of a very human social media campaign. So it's a very rogue example, but a guy called Drew Opologi in the States, he set up a hashtag, Blame Drew's Cancer. And obviously that's not a light subject, but what he did was he was raising money and awareness of a very rare type of cancer. And he asked people, celebrities, influencers, family members, to blame everything on Drew's cancer. And so it went viral, this very human, not funny, but there was heart to it. And so you had NFL players blaming their loss of the game on Drew's cancer. And it grew and grew and grew. And it was one hashtag. And what it did, it seemed like, I think people think campaigning is a very serious, dark, heavy subject, when actually you can do it in a way that fits you. And if there is a story, if you're meeting women, men at the school gates, at the nursery gates who have issues, how can you amplify their voices in a human way? And I think this is what frustrates me sometimes, is all these social media activists, people are like, oh, the noise gets lost. Well, actually, no, if you have a human entry point, it can really push your message. And I think if you don't know how to do that, reach out to somebody who does. Digital mums, for example. You could say, guys, look, hey, you guys seem to know what you're doing. Do you know anyone out there who could work pro bono for us? Just help us with this. There are people out there, and I think it's reaching out, as obviously everybody has here, and realising you can't do this alone always. Very happy to offer up some help as well if you need it.
Yeah, please get in touch with people after as well. Amplification is what it's about, and perhaps the most feminist thing that it's possible to do. It's about giving someone a shout out for someone else. Sophie, you looked like you wanted to say something there. Have you got something to add?
I mean, I just wanted to say, to bring together a few things and respond to you as well. I feel your pain, right? Activism is hard, and it is a constant process of reinvention. How can I get this message through? What ways can I use? What networks can I use? And it can sometimes feel that you're just flinging yourself at one wall after another wall after another wall. And I'm also conscious, as you said, that we have used some quite negative words up here about burnout and getting sweaty and how hard it is. And so one thing I really want to say is that you can be different kinds of activists at different times, right? There is not one figure of an activist who is this dogged, staunch, we can do it type. You can offer different things at different times. And it is totally okay to say at certain times in your campaigning, I'm not going to do it like this for a while, I'm going to step out and I'm going to let somebody else do it this way. Or to think, very frankly, this isn't working. How do we come at it in a very different way to help it work? And that's why building your own support network is really important. You need to have people who've got your back. Like you are an activist on behalf of others. You are seeking to raise the voices of other people. You are working for those people. Who's got your back? Who do you trust? Who will tell you when you're getting it wrong? Who will tell you every day how absolutely brilliant you are? Those networks behind you are just as important as the networks you're trying to make in front of you.
I hope that was helpful, Candice.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Any other questions in the audience? Yes, there's one here in the middle.
Okay, actually, I think it was
we'll come to you next.
Yeah,
I've clocked
sorry
you.
about that. I nicked it. My question, I was going to ask it last time, but I can reword it to make it work for this one too. My job, I had a best friend, a teacher, and then she was promoted to deputy head while I was on maternity leave. Coming back, and now I'm coming back from my second maternity leave, I've found she still doesn't have children, and it's been a real disconnect. So how do you approach it when the person you're gonna piss off is your friend? Because that being uncomfortable, my children call her auntie, but she really doesn't quite understand what it's like to have children. And being a teacher, our job isn't flexible anyway because someone's got to watch the kids. So you've got to have someone, we work in a small school. So it's more that, how do you balance the friendship with the activism side of things?
This is quite a delicate one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Who wants to tread lightly on this? Akeela?
Yeah. I'll give it a stab. So I think that kind of situation can arise in so many different situations in the workplace. And I think it's really important to have boundaries. And maybe you can have a conversation with your friend about boundaries, about, you know, how you are outside of the workplace shouldn't necessarily come into basically how you are in the workplace, because sometimes that dynamic can kind of cross both ways. And I think that's my kind of biggest advice. It's basically just having maybe a conversation, if she can, with her about not allowing the kind of the boundaries to blur, essentially. And maybe also just inviting her to conferences like this as well, you know, and just kind of educating her about what it's like to be a mum, sending articles, that kind of thing.
And I think proof is almost in doing it as well. Like, my biggest critic has been my dad. You know, like, he was kind of like, why are you doing this? I mean, and he's kind of the top layer of that quite archaic group of white middle-class men who were making decisions on behalf of a company. And now he's the one coming to me going, oh, I know what you should call it. You shouldn't call it job sharing. You should call it job pairing, because that's more positive. You're pairing two brilliant minds together. I'm like, Dad, you've pulled a full, like, 180. And my closest friend said, I don't think this is going to work. I don't understand what you're doing. I mean, I know people who will take the piss if they get flexible working. They'll just be hungover the next day. Proof with her has been in just doing it, continuing with it, but continuing with the communication throughout. I think if you're confident in what you're doing, no one who cares about you is going to stop you from doing it or let that affect your friendship or relationship. My dad's still my dad.
Oh, you may create an unexpected ally. There was a woman here with a question, who I can't see anymore. Yes, you, blue jumper and scarf.
Hi. Quick question, Sophie. You've mentioned the word intersectionality a few times. I'm not sure everybody in this audience will understand what you mean by that. Maybe they do. I just wondered if you could explain what you mean by that and give some examples.
Yeah, okay. Intersectionality was a word framed, first of all, by Kimberly Crenshaw. What it means, it refers to the point at which all of our experiences as different kinds of women intersect. I started off as a white middle-class woman. I then began to understand that my daughter was disabled, then that there was going to be an intersection of being female and being disabled that would be an additional layer of oppression, if you like. On top of that, you then add working, class, you add race, ethnicity, sexuality. There's all sorts of bits on the lived experience of women that intersect to demonstrate different layers of oppression. Does that help?
Anybody want to add to that on the panel? That was pretty comprehensive, though, wasn't it? I mean, basically what it demonstrates is that the odds are more stacked against certain people. And that, in turn, reveals that this is all the more important, and examples of reaching out, of amplifying, of connecting and using our campaigns to reach across.
I was just going to say that if like, as feminists, if you're always talking about barriers being childcare, it's not, some people have 10 barriers before they even get to childcare to get into these meetings. So that's what you have to think about when it comes to intersectionality.
Yeah.
And I think using your platform as much as you can, and I definitely do not do it enough, and I'm trying to do it. I came very much to the party the same as Sophie, going, I'll fix this, when actually, and I went in a very bull in a china shop approach, when actually it's listening, it's understanding, letting people maybe come to you with their experience. And we ran a round table at the Equality and Human Rights Commission, where a brilliant woman called Lourdes Valentino came and spoke about her experience as a retail worker, and the fact that she had to bring her child to work one day because in the summer holidays she didn't have the money to bridge the gap between when her shift ended and school finished. And so she had her child in the stockroom for an hour, and she got reported to her company for that. And instead of asking, why is this situation happening, she got penalised and red-carded almost. And so she spoke at the Equality and Human Rights Commission about the issue around 0-hour contracts. And her experience was brought to the table. I was not relevant. I was just in the background. But if you can be a facilitator to amplify those voices, and that's something I definitely need to do more of.
Akeela.
Yeah, no, I just want to add to all of that.
Do you have a campaign about it? She speaks, we hear. That's exactly the point, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I think one big part of intersectionality is to recognise that often in kind of mainstream spaces, people who are kind of from marginalised groups won't have access. So, often, I say often, but sometimes I've been into feminist spaces where Muslim women have been treated appallingly, and they've kind of either not been spoken to, or it's just kind of they've kind of been told, actually, you can't be a feminist because of who you are, because of your faith or whatever. So I think a big part of intersectionality is also understanding that there are many women who are facing so many different barriers and experiences, but then also doing the next step to think about, are those women around the table, are they in this space? And then if they are in this space, what am I doing to ensure that they are treated equally?
Because as a campaigner, it's easy to look at the really big successful ones without realising that, there are people with smaller voices that it's easy to, that can be promoted and shared the platform
I think it's really interesting to recognise that we don't know everything. So you're not expected to either. So even if you do see somebody who wears a hijab, you might not understand their religion. You might think they're oppressed or whatever. But if you read, you educate yourself, you can find out. You can actually go and research this. We've got Google now, and rather than just making those assumptions.
Can I come to the question that was yes? And is there any chance of I can chug it from the bottle, but it would be unseemly. Thank you.
Hi, I loved what you said about motherhood radicalises women. I have a friend who said she didn't realise that she was a feminist until she had her first children. And I was like, yeah, that's totally how I feel. I'm really interested to understand if there's a way that we can bring some of these questions to bear for much younger women to help insulate themselves before they get that crash course when you have kids and you suddenly realise, shit, I can't go back to work, shit, my relationship's really awful and I can't talk to my husband and it's a nightmare. Like, how can we bring that dialogue to younger women in a way that's relevant for them, that kind of helps to prepare them to think about it rather than just follow the norm, I suppose?
That's a good question.
I would immediately turn that on its head and say that the problems that women have when they become women are not for women to fix amongst themselves. There's always this idea that, like, if we just all try a bit harder, ladies. And I think the idea that we need to go to younger women and say, look, there's something really awful behind that hill, let me tell you all about it. Possibly not the best way to, Also, I think at this point, more than any other point, the feminist movement needs to be listening to younger women and encouraging young women to lead this movement. So my answer is structural. This is where my policy advisor in the front row goes, oh my God, I've heard this bit 3,000 times. But the way we solve this is we completely restructure our economy and our society and our politics, and God knows we have never needed it more. Like, Westminster is in meltdown, right? So you can fix it. Like, you activists have never been more necessary to fix it, with an understanding that our inequality is structural. How do we solve the childcare problems women have? We invest in care at the same level that we invest in men's jobs. And you follow and grow a movement that does that. And I'm sorry that that's a much bigger answer than, like, what do we say to the girls that don't get it? But that is not an approach that is going to resolve stuff. We've got to seize hold of the turbulence in front of us and use it, because the timing has never been better, frankly. And I know that sounds like an odd thing to say when everything is such a mess, but we need new voices, we need new ideas, we need new activists, we need new bravery, we need new bloody-mindedness. We need all of you in here to be out doing this on a massive scale. So let's think beyond fixing it small scale by telling each other how bad it's going to be. Let's build something enormous and brave.
I just... I just wanted to say that I think, and we've seen some of that happen in the US with the midterm elections and the number of women that have been elected to Congress. So I just want to say that, yeah, we can do it. I just wanted to kind of echo that.
And I think, like, on a social media level, answering that question, you can actually start within your own home. It can be big movements, big ideas, but it starts in your own home. We did a talk at a lower sixth boys' school in Guildford, and they all just sat there slumped in their chairs looking at me like, "You're mad, woman." And I thought, Jesus Christ, we've got quite a battle here. I posted the next day saying I was dispirited, nobody was interested. What came off the back of that was a guy coming on going, "This is just how boys sit. We just sit like that." They were angry at me for making assumptions because they were just slumped in their chairs, but they were listening.
Everybody sits up.
Yeah. And what started then was a huge debate and discussion on social media between one boy that went in going punctually, "The gender pay gap is a myth." And you had lower
original.
You had lower sixth boys arguing out with those who are living the experience, and you had then a lot of the boys coming in arguing against those that have said the gender pay gap is a myth, and it's cracking open those conversations. And you can do that from your own home. You can do that a little bit further on social media, and as Sophie said, on a much bigger scale, see marching in the streets, but there's entry levels to this, and don't feel like it's an overwhelming thing that has to be done. It can start in a very simple place.
That's absolutely where you would hope that conversation would go, you know, to crack that open exactly there amongst young men. So good on you.
I suppose what I also meant by that was, like, be ambitious in what you're asking for, right? That was sort of behind what I was also trying to say. Like, you don't, like, fixing it doesn't have to be about warning people what's coming. You can absolutely ask for the moon.
I want to just have a quick whisk around, because we're here to give practical advice. And so I want to ask the panellists what advice they wish they'd got a few years ago or at the outset. You know, what do you wish you'd known? What would have really been a useful, practical piece of advice? Can I start with you? Come to the mic.
Sorry. A practical piece of advice would have been, don't be afraid to ask for help, because, as I said before, if you're passionate and you believe in what you're doing, it will just emanate from inside. And people, if they magnetise towards, if they believe in what you're doing as well, they'll help you. So at the moment, we're not funded with the journal, but we've got somebody running our social media, we've got lots of people writing for us, and all of these things, and nobody's being paid. I know that's no real change, asking women to work for free, but it's a start. And so, yeah, I just think that, don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't try and do it all by yourself. And meditate.
Very good, very good. Practical solutions. Anna?
It's actually something that About Time, I think, did from the start, is to own it from the start. I think you did that very much in terms of, like, the way it looked, what you were saying. It was clear, we're doing this. There's no point kind of edging in, going, I'm just going to try this. It's like, right, we're here, we're saying this. Own it from the beginning. You can do that with very simple apps. Don't underestimate the use of visual tools that you've got out there. People will ignore a really badly penned post. They will ignore a sort of pixelated image. Try and use the best that you possibly can. And if you don't have it, ask your friends who might be able to do that.
If you don't have experience in that, can you sort of do that from scratch, in your opinion?
You can. So you can use InstaQuote, for example. If you've got a point you want to get across about nurseries, you can put the big stats on an InstaQuote. That's as simple as saying in a long-winded way, you know, this is the issue. And I think don't let anybody tell you, as I kind of listened to at the beginning, that you're not an expert. I've had a lot of people saying, but what makes you an expert at flexible working? I am not an expert. I am a very frustrated, angry woman who does not want to see my daughters go through what I went through. And that, I think as long as you stay clear on that, you can take whatever is thrown at you because you know what your purpose is to continue going. But yeah, I'd suggest looking at about time for how to start out, to own it from the beginning.
So, and just to completely emphasise that again, visually it matters, doesn't it? If you're running a social media campaign, the visuals are very important.
It doesn't have to cost much either. I think that's the thing. And write down on a list what you can do. For me, it was social media and writing. What I can't do is images and design. And so I put out an email to my friends and said, does anyone know anyone who can help me with this? And that's how it started. And I think you said, you know, people are behind what you're doing because you're not the only one going through it.
Thank you, that's very useful. Akeela, what do you wish youngster Akeela what words of wisdom would you give to yourself in the past?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I would have loved it if somebody said to me, don't wait for permission. You know, you don't need somebody to give you permission to start off doing, you know, being a campaigner or doing anything actually. And then you don't need somebody to give you validation either. You don't need somebody to pat you on the back and say, well done, because people aren't going to do that. And I spent so much time kind of being unconfident and even now having imposter syndrome and all of that, that I wish I just didn't waste all that time doing that. And then I think the other thing, similar to your point, which is about owning your narrative. Again, don't wait for somebody to tell you, I'm like you, so it's okay for you to kind of talk in this way or whatever, or, you know, that's how you should talk about these things. You can just own your narrative. And I think for me as a Muslim woman, that was really, really important because there wasn't any examples of people like me talking about who they are and what they do, and actually it's not one-dimensional, it doesn't fit into a neat box or whatever. So that I think those are the kind of three key things, I think. If somebody told me that, I would have spent less time agonizing, I think.
Oh, thank you.
It's very easy, isn't it, to say spend less time agonizing, but we do, right? So I think the first thing is to be really aware that as feminist activists, you are operating in a society that will tell you that you're wrong and that you're irrelevant and that your experiences don't matter. None of this is true. And the fact that you will be feeling a bit outfaced at times, or that you are stupid or wrong, or that you must just keep trying harder, is because you are trying to make change in a system that hasn't made space for change for centuries. So build your own networks, build with people who you trust, who will have your back, and delegate. I have seen so many good ideas come to nothing because the person who had the idea couldn't bear to share it.
Delegate. That's hard though, isn't it? Because if it's your kind of baby, your idea, you know, we've talked about the passion, you know, with whatever the triggers were that made us start our campaigns. It's hard, it's very hard to let go of that. How do you manage that? How do you delegate?
Well, sometimes my trusted network of friends will like prize it from my grip. And other times, I mean, it's a learning. Look, being an activist is a learning process, right? We still think that you're either born an activist or you become an activist and that's the end of it. It's this massive roller coaster. There's a whole philosophy behind it. You will feel despair and you will feel anger and then you will feel hope. And then you might actually learn a bit about collaborating. And then you will start to build confidence around telling your own story. And this word resilience gets bandied around all the time, and I hate it because it suggests that, you know, if we're just better versions of ourselves, everything will be okay. If we do enough yoga and running and baking and, you know, all that stuff, just like, you know, build your resilience,
I hate
ladies.
baking. I really
it's
hate baking.
awful. Like, we are a movement, right? The whole, like, campaigning is about building a movement, and we are only as strong as the movement. So make it big.
Make it big. Right, there's someone who's had a hand up for a while. Yes, please. Shout it out. Yeah, go on. The microphone's just come. Let's start again, yeah.
Hi. I've been made redundant when I was 7 months pregnant by a renowned fashion brand working at the head office. So it's really amazing to just be here today and surrounded by you, because it gives me a little bit of strength. My thought so far is, how is it even possible? Well, it is. I've been thinking many times to go to the papers and make it public, although the fashion world is very, very small and powerful. And you can very easily become the troublemaker and be excluded by opportunities, which is terrifying when looking for a job, as it's what I'm doing right now. I was wondering which ways are out there to do something or to make me feel this has a voice without compromising my reputational career. I don't think I have what you have, and yeah.
So just to clarify, you're
Yes.
currently employed by a fashion company?
Not anymore.
Not anymore, but you want to be?
No, I was, and I was made redundant.
Right.
When I just gave birth a few months ago.
Well, that sounds illegal to me. I mean, but just to clarify your question,
Yes.
is that what you would like, presumably, is to find out other people, to create some kind of community or network?
I've always thinking a bit about making this public, but of course I'm aware I will put my reputation at risk in this career world, because my world, I'm sure other types of worlds are like that, is the same. So I'm terrified about speaking out. So are there any ways to...
I think there are lots. I'm going to quickly ask the team for a 1-minute answer, but...
Talk to Julie.
Short. Yeah. I think we should all talk to
people
you later,
behind you.
actually. Well, yes, come and find us after.
And also that does sound very illegal.
It sounds illegal, and there are definitely people that can help you. And, and that's a great... And the fashion industry, for goodness sake, they can afford to look good, can't they? They have to consider their appearance. I mean, really, that's a great story, actually. So definitely would like to hear more about that. But I just want to make sure that we've got all of the questions, because we are going to run out of time quite soon. I'm getting
Sorry, we're 10 minutes over. My
we're
bad.
10 minutes over?
Yeah, my bad.
What?
It's been too brilliant, hasn't it? We didn't even notice. We were meant to finish 10 minutes ago. Thank you so much, though. It's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. Akeela is off to London Women's March now. Please support that. Obviously, we're here today, but yes, go, go, go. Support that campaign on social media. And obviously, make sure you support all of these women's amazing campaigns and vote for them. That's the least we can do, really, isn't it? Thank you so much for your time. That was absolutely brilliant. Take care.